He said, "I love you," in front of everyone, so I laughed and said, "Don't make things weird." I'm Candence, 25, and let me tell you about the most awkward freaking dinner of my life that somehow turned into a year-long disaster. I met Peter at my coworker Jess's housewarming. I wasn't even planning to go, but thank God I did, because the moment I saw him standing by the snack table, something just clicked. He wasn't my usual type, more clean-cut than I typically go for. But he had this confident smile and a good job, and honestly, I was so over dating losers who couldn't get their lives together. We hit it off immediately. He asked for my number, and unlike other guys who play the waiting game, he texted me that same night to say he had a great time meeting me. I remember lying in bed, smiling at my phone like an idiot, already picturing our future together. By our third date, I was telling my best friend Allison that I'd found the one. Things moved pretty quickly after that. Within 2 months, we were spending most weekends together, and I'd already made a private wedding Pinterest board. I know that sounds crazy, but when you know, right? I'd been to enough weddings alone, watching all my college friends find their perfect guys, while I kept picking commitment phobes. Peter was different. Stable, had his own place, a job with growth potential. And he looked at me like I hung the moon. The only small issue was this weird thing that happened whenever we were in public. I'd get this uncomfortable feeling when he'd try to hold my hand or kiss me in front of other people. I can't explain it. Maybe it was leftover trauma from my ex who cheated, or maybe I just didn't want to be one of those obnoxious couples always pawing at each other. Either way, I'd find myself tensing up or creating distance between us at parties or family gatherings. But in private, totally different story. I'd tell him constantly how perfect we were together, how we were meant to find each other. I started dropping hints about rings around month 3. Nothing major, just casually pointing out styles I liked whenever jewelry commercials came on TV, or tagging him in Instagram posts of proposal ideas. He never seemed uncomfortable with it, which I took as a good sign. By month 5, I'd already started researching venues in our area and making notes about guest lists and color schemes. Allison thought I was getting ahead of myself, but she didn't understand. When you find a good one, you lock it down fast. I remember the exact moment I realized I needed to step up my game. We were at dinner with my friend Kate and her husband Mark, who'd been married about a year. Kate kept doing this thing where she'd touch Mark's arm when she laughed or lean her head on his shoulder, and I noticed how Peter watched them with this wistful expression. Later that night, he asked why I never did that kind of stuff when we were out with friends. I made some excuse about not being big on PDA, but the truth was, something about displaying affection for him in front of others made me cringe inside. Which was weird, because I'd been literally planning our wedding for months. Looking back, I should have recognized the disconnect, but I was too focused on the end goal. I'd spent years watching friends get engaged, obsessively checking their ring photos and wedding hashtags. Now it was finally my turn, and I wasn't about to let a little awkwardness get in the way. I started subtly improving Peter, suggesting different haircuts, buying him clothes that were more my style, casually mentioning how he could advance faster in his career if he took my advice. He was always so eager to please me, which made it easy. My mom noticed the mismatch before anyone. "You talk about marrying this boy, but you still introduce him as my friend Peter," she pointed out after a family dinner. I brushed it off, claiming I didn't want to jinx our relationship by being too serious too fast. But the truth was, something felt off whenever I had to publicly claim him. In private, I was all in, planning our future house, our future kids' names, even researching school districts. But in public, I'd physically move away if he tried to put his arm around me. Everything came to a head at my cousin Melissa's engagement party. My entire extended family was there, including all the aunts who'd been asking when it was my turn since I turned 23. I was already on edge from fielding their questions about my relationship status, so I'd been extra clingy with Peter all night, proving to everyone that I wasn't going to be the last single cousin. We were sitting at a table with my parents and my Aunt Linda, who kept making these pointed comments about how Melissa had finally found a good one. I remember squeezing Peter's hand under the table, feeling this surge of competitive energy. I'd found a good one too, see? That's when it happened. Peter, who'd been mostly quiet all night, suddenly squeezed my hand back and looked at me with this intense expression. Then, loud enough for the whole table to hear, he said, "I just want you all to know that I've fallen completely in love with your daughter. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." The entire table went silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. And in that horrible, suspended moment, instead of feeling warm and loved, I felt trapped and exposed. So I laughed, this awkward, forced laugh, and said, "Don't make things weird, we're just having fun." The words came out before I could stop them. The look on Peter's face is something I'll never forget. It was like watching someone's heart break in real time. My mom gasped audibly, and my dad suddenly became very interested in his dessert. Aunt Linda's eyebrows shot up so high they practically disappeared into her hairline. The silence that followed was deafening. I spent the rest of the night in panic mode, overcompensating with forced affection I normally avoided, sitting practically in Peter's lap, kissing his cheek repeatedly, using pet names I'd never used before. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it, that moment of truth that exposed the fundamental disconnect in our relationship. Peter loved me, publicly and sincerely, and I loved the idea of having a wedding. The drive home was silent except for my rambling attempts to explain myself, which somehow morphed into blaming him for ambushing me with such a personal declaration in front of my family. Looking back now, that night was the beginning of the end, though our relationship limped on for nearly a year afterward. It was the moment the mask slipped, revealing the truth I wasn't ready to face. I was more in love with the idea of being engaged than I was with the man who wanted to marry me. The week after the incident, that's what I called it in my head, was super awkward. Peter was distant, quieter, less affectionate. I knew I'd hurt him, but instead of honestly apologizing, I went into full damage control mode. Not because I truly loved him, though I convinced myself I did, but because I'd already put in 8 months and wasn't about to throw away my wedding plans. I bombarded him with attention at home, made his favorite meals, initiated sex more often, planned surprise date nights, all the things relationship articles say you should do. But whenever he tried to talk about what happened, I'd deflect. "My family just makes me nervous," or "I wasn't expecting you to say that so publicly." I even made up this whole story about how my ex had publicly humiliated me, total lie, so I had trauma around public declarations. Watching Peter's face soften with sympathy as I fake cried through this story made me feel powerful and guilty at the same time. Meanwhile, I doubled down on wedding planning. I started secret appointments with venues during my lunch breaks. I even tried on dresses with Allison one weekend while telling Peter I was helping my mom with something. When Allison asked if this wasn't putting the cart before the horse, I snapped at her. "I'm just being efficient with my time," I said. But the truth was, I was terrified Peter might be reconsidering our whole relationship. My social media told a completely different story than our reality. I posted perfectly staged couple photos with captions like, "So blessed to have found my forever." While in real life, I was still cringing whenever Peter tried to hold my hand at the grocery store. I started noticing how much I criticized him, too. His clothes, his haircut, even the way he laughed at movies. I kept thinking he'd be the perfect husband if he just changed about 15 different things about himself. Money became another issue. I started forgetting my wallet more often, expecting Peter to cover our dates. I needed to save for my wedding vision, after all. I never told him I was diverting nearly half my paycheck into a secret account, earmarked for wedding expenses. When he mentioned splitting bills more fairly, I acted offended, as if he was being petty. Relationships aren't 50-50, I'd say, conveniently ignoring that. In our case, it was more like 20-80. The craziest part? Even as I was planning our wedding behind his back and lying about money, I truly believed I was the victim in our relationship. I'd complain to my friends about how Peter just didn't get me, or how he was so clingy because he wanted basic affection in public. They'd validate me, of course. "He's lucky to have you," they'd say, and I'd believe it. No one questioned why I was so uncomfortable showing affection to the man I supposedly wanted to marry. Looking back, I think Peter knew something was off, but he wanted so badly to believe in us. That's what makes me feel the worst now. He was genuine, and I was playing house. 3 months after the incident, things started unraveling faster. Peter became more observant, noticing things I thought I was hiding well. One night, he asked why I always deleted my text messages before bed. My heart nearly stopped. I'd been venting to my work friend Jason about Peter's annoying habits and occasionally flirting just to keep my options open. Nothing physical had happened, but the texts definitely weren't something a devoted girlfriend should be sending. "I just like keeping my phone organized," I lied smoothly, but I could tell he wasn't buying it. That's when the panic set in. I started being more careful, putting a passcode on my phone, taking calls in another room, making sure to clear my browsing history after looking at wedding venues. The real wake-up call came when Peter's parents visited for dinner. His mom kept watching me with this concerned expression whenever I interrupted Peter or brushed off his stories. At one point, she said, "You two seem different than last time we visited." Peter quickly changed the subject, but later that week, he mentioned that his parents had concerns about our relationship. I exploded, calling them interfering and judgmental, when deep down I knew they'd just seen through my act. My pretending was getting exhausting. I'd been living a double life. Wedding-obsessed planner by day, emotionally unavailable girlfriend by night. Once, Peter found a bridal magazine I'd forgotten to hide and jokingly asked if I was trying to tell him something. Instead of laughing it off, I got defensive and accused him of snooping, which led to our first major fight. That fight revealed a lot. In the heat of the moment, I said things like, "Maybe if you had a better job, I would be more excited about our future." The look of hurt on his face should have made me stop and reflect, but instead, I just kept going, releasing all my pent-up resentment. After that night, something fundamental changed between us. The wall I'd built got higher, and Peter stopped trying to climb it. Meanwhile, I was getting impatient. According to my mental timeline, we should have been engaged by now. I started pushing harder, leaving ring websites open on my laptop, talking about friends' engagements constantly, even dragging him past jewelry stores and lingering by the window. When he didn't take the bait, I'd pout for days. What I didn't know was that Peter had started doing his own detective work. Later, I found out he'd discovered the secret credit card statement I'd carelessly left in my car. The one showing thousands spent on wedding venue deposits. He'd also seen an email confirmation for a wedding dress appointment I'd forgotten to delete. Instead of confronting me immediately, he watched and waited, gathering evidence of my deception piece by piece. I should have noticed the signs: his careful questions about our future, his sudden interest in our finances, the way he'd watch me when I was on my phone. But I was too caught up in my fantasy to see the reality crumbling around me. I'd convinced myself I was just being prepared rather than dishonest and manipulative. That self-deception was about to blow up in my face. Our 1-year anniversary should have been special. In my head, it was going to be the night Peter finally proposed. I'd even dropped the most obvious hints, sending my friend to casually mention the rings I liked, leaving the tab open on my laptop to an article titled "Perfect Anniversary Proposals." I'd booked us at this fancy restaurant downtown, and even tipped off the server that my boyfriend might be proposing, so they should be ready with a camera. God, I was delusional. Peter showed up looking serious, carrying a small gift bag that made my heart race. This was it, but as dinner progressed, he didn't seem nervous or excited, just oddly calm and determined. When he finally said, "We need to talk about our future," I nearly squealed, thinking it was his lead-in to a proposal. Instead, he pulled out a stack of papers from his jacket. Credit card statements, venue deposit receipts, screenshots of inappropriate texts with Jason from work. Even a printout of a prenup template I'd been researching that heavily favored me in case of divorce. As he laid them out one by one, my stomach dropped to my feet. "I've been gathering these for weeks," he said quietly. I needed to make sure I wasn't crazy, that what I was seeing was real. I tried every trick in my playbook. First denial, "Those aren't mine." Then anger, "How dare you spy on me?" When those didn't work, I switched to tears, claiming everything was done because I love you so much. But Peter just sat there, unmoved by the performance he'd seen too many times before. "The venue deposit is what really gets me," he said. "You paid $3,000 to reserve a wedding venue when I haven't even proposed. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or did you think you could manipulate me into proposing before the deposit deadline?" The truth was, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been so caught up in my wedding fantasy that reality had become an inconvenience. When I didn't answer, Peter sighed deeply. "You know what hurts the most?" he continued. "Every time I tried to actually connect with you, like when I said I loved you at your family dinner, you pushed me away. But you had no problem planning our entire future without me. It was never about us building a life together. It was about you getting the wedding you wanted, regardless of who the groom was." His words hit me like a slap. For the first time, I saw myself through his eyes. Calculating, manipulative, fake. The worst part was, he wasn't even angry, he just looked tired and sad. "I deserved better than this," he said finally, standing up. "And honestly, Candace, so did you. You deserve to actually love the person you marry, not just the idea of a wedding." He left me sitting alone at that expensive restaurant, staring at the evidence of my deception spread across the table. The server came by later, asking awkwardly if there was still going to be a proposal. I just shook my head, too numb to even be embarrassed. That night, I went home to find Peter had packed a bag with essentials. He said he'd come back for the rest of his things while I was at work. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting or throwing things, just the quiet end of a relationship that had been built on my delusions rather than real connection. The aftermath was brutal. I didn't know how to process being the villain in my own love story, so I did what any self-respecting toxic person would do. I rewrote the narrative. Within days, I'd crafted the perfect victim story for social media. Sometimes people aren't ready for the love you have to give. Healing my heart and focusing on me. My DMs flooded with sympathy messages, which I soaked up like a sponge. To friends who knew some of the truth, I spun a more elaborate tale. Peter was emotionally unavailable, afraid of commitment, even probably talking to other girls. The few who had witnessed the dinner incident or knew about my secret wedding planning got cut off completely. I couldn't risk them exposing the truth. The venue deposit became a strange fixation for me. Even after Peter was gone, I refused to cancel it. "I'll still use it someday," I told Allison, who was starting to distance herself from me. The wedding binder stayed on my coffee table like some weird shrine to a future that would never happen. What I didn't expect was how quickly the emptiness would set in. For months, I'd been running on the adrenaline of planning and manipulating. Now, with no one to deceive, I felt hollow. I tried filling the void with attention from other guys, even going on dates just a couple weeks after the breakup. But none of them measured up to the idealized husband I'd imagined Peter would become. I stalked his social media religiously. At first, there was nothing, just typical guy posts about sports and occasional hangouts with friends. But 3 months after our breakup, a girl appeared in one of his photos. Nothing romantic, just a group setting, but I recognized the way he was looking at her. It was how he used to look at me before I crushed his spirit. Her name was Emma, a coworker I vaguely remembered him mentioning. The jealousy hit me like a physical illness. I spent nights scrolling through her profiles, comparing myself to her, creating elaborate scenarios in my head where she was manipulating him or using him. I couldn't accept that maybe he had simply found someone who genuinely cared about him. In my darkest moments, I drafted messages to him. Everything from accusations to apologies to declarations of undying love. Thankfully, I never sent them. What I did do was even more pathetic. I accidentally ran into him at a coffee shop near his work, wearing the sweater he once said he liked. The conversation was awkward and brief. I mentioned being so much more self-aware now and really working on myself. All lies designed to make him think I'd changed. He was polite but distant, and when I suggested getting together sometime to catch up properly, he declined with a gentle finality that left no room for misinterpretation. That night, I drunk texted him a paragraph about how I was the only one who truly understood him, and how Emma would never love him like I did. He never responded, And the next day, I saw he blocked me on all platforms. It was the final door closing on any chance of reconciliation. Even the friendship I'd been planning to leverage into something more eventually. The next year passed in a blur of short-term relationships that followed the same pattern. Intense interest at first, wedding planning in secret, then growing resentment as the guys failed to live up to the perfect husband image in my head. None lasted more than a few months. My friends started making excuses when I invited them out, tired of the same toxic stories where I was always the wronged party. Even Allison, my oldest friend, finally called me out after I sabotaged a promising relationship by comparing the guy to Peter constantly. "You need therapy, not a boyfriend," she said bluntly. I didn't speak to her for weeks after that. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Peter through mutual acquaintances. I heard his relationship with Emma was getting serious. They'd moved in together, adopted a dog, all the normal couple things I'd fantasized about, but somehow made impossible with my behavior. In my bitter moments, I convinced myself their relationship would implode, just like ours had. "She'll see his true colors eventually," I'd tell anyone who would listen, projecting my own toxicity onto him. Around the 18-month mark after our breakup, the notification that shattered my carefully constructed reality appeared on my phone. Peter and Emma were engaged. The post showed them on a hiking trail, her displaying a simple but elegant ring, both beaming with genuine happiness. The caption thanked family and friends for supporting us on our journey to find each other. I stared at that photo for hours, zooming in on her face, his face, the ring. I scrolled through the comments, so many congratulations, so much joy for them both. People I knew, our mutual friends, all celebrating this woman who was living the life I had mapped out for myself. The engagement announcement had over 200 likes. My breakup post had gotten 43. I completely lost it. Crying, screaming into my pillow, even throwing my phone across the room when another notification about their engagement popped up. The unfairness of it all consumed me. I was the one who'd planned a wedding with him. I was the one who'd picked out the perfect venue. How dare he give all that to someone else? The fact that I had never truly loved him, that I'd treated him terribly, that I'd been planning a wedding rather than a marriage. None of that registered in my breakdown. All I could see was that another woman had stolen what was rightfully mine. In my most desperate moment, I created a fake Instagram account and sent Emma a long message detailing Peter's issues and how he wasn't who she thought he was. I included personal details about our relationship that only I would know, thinking this would prove my credibility. What I didn't anticipate was Emma simply showing the message to Peter, who immediately recognized my writing style and specific details. She blocked the account, and Peter's only response was to have a mutual friend warn me that if I contacted either of them again, they would pursue legal options. That threat finally broke through my delusion. For the first time, I was forced to confront how unhinged my behavior had become. This wasn't just me being passionate or knowing what I want. This was harassment. The shame hit me all at once, not just for the fake account, but for everything. The manipulation, the lying, the secret wedding planning, the public humiliation at the family dinner, all of it. I'd love to say this was my rock bottom moment, that I immediately got therapy and turned my life around. But the truth is messier. I did delete the fake account and stopped actively stalking their social media, but I still couldn't fully accept responsibility. Instead, I shifted blame. It was my parents' fault for pressuring me about marriage, or society's for making women think a wedding is the ultimate achievement, or even Peter's for not understanding how I show love. 6 months after their engagement announcement, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw pictures from their wedding. It was nothing like the elaborate affair I'd planned in my binder. Just a simple ceremony in a botanical garden with close friends and family. But the joy on their faces was undeniable. There was a candid shot of them looking at each other during the vows that made my stomach clench. No one had ever looked at me that way, because I'd never allowed anyone to truly see me. That night, I finally pulled out my wedding planning binder and flipped through it. Venue brochures, cake designs, dress clippings, even a guest list with Peter's family members who I'd barely known. None of it was about him or us as a couple. It was all about the event, the photos, the social media posts. I'd been planning a perfect day, not a life together. In a rare moment of clarity, I threw the binder in the trash. The venue deposit had long expired, money wasted on a future that was never real. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried. Not for Peter, but for myself and the emptiness I'd been trying to fill with wedding aesthetics, instead of genuine connection. I'd like to say I've completely changed since then, but that would be another lie in a long line of them. I still catch myself evaluating men as potential husbands, instead of getting to know them as people. I still feel jealous when friends get engaged. I still sometimes blame Peter for giving up on us, rather than acknowledging how impossible I made it to love me. But I'm trying. I've started therapy, though I sometimes catch myself performing there too, giving answers I think sound self-aware rather than being truly honest. I'm single for the first time in years and learning to sit with that discomfort. I've apologized to Allison, who cautiously let me back into her life. And sometimes, in my most honest moments, I think about that night at my cousin's engagement party, when Peter said, "I love you." And I laughed and said, "Don't make things weird." I wonder what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to be vulnerable, to say it back, to let myself be truly seen, rather than maintaining the perfect image I thought I needed to project. But that would have required a different version of me. One who valued connection over control, authenticity over appearance. Maybe someday, I'll be that person. For now, I'm just trying to stop planning weddings with men I don't actually